All right, let's create the ability now to just click one of these buttons that's going to do both the showing and the hiding rather than having two buttons for that behavior. So what I'll do is I'll just delete this show button. Okay, and now we've got this hide button and its logic, okay? But how do we make this button now do two things? Okay, essentially we've got to have the button kind of ask the application, look, if this group is visible, then hide it. If it's not visible, then show it, okay? So we've got some version of a decision tree essentially here, right? The button is clicked. Okay, and then we're asking, look, is the group visible? If it is, right, if the answer is yes, okay, then we want to hide it. And if the answer is no, then we want to show it, okay? So we want this one button to do both of this behavior. So how do we do that? Well, if we come back into our workflow tab, we actually have this option on the event itself to select an only when condition, okay? So what that means is that when this condition is true, when it is present, okay, then we're going to execute the actions. And if it's not, then we're not going to do anything, okay? So what we can actually do, if we click on that, we can come down and select group master as sort of like the first anchor for this condition and click is visible. So Bubble gives you like this really intuitive, human readable language when you are selecting these kind of expressions, creating these kind of expressions. Okay, so now we've got a condition only when group master is visible, then we want to hide the master group, okay? If we reload the page, really nothing should be changing here from our initial setup, right? It's still working just as we would expect. And just as a quick aside, like what I've just done here, right? I made one change, okay? And then I went and previewed it just to make sure that it was working again. That's a really good habit to be in when you are developing, rather than making like a whole bunch of edits and changes to logic and then previewing them, okay? Because in that scenario, what you risk is creating some kind of bug and it's not going to be clear where that bug actually came from because you change so many things at once, right? Narrowing it down is going to take you longer. The alternative is if you just change the one thing, okay, and then you test it, if it's broken and it was working before, well, then you know that it was just that most recent edit that you made that's responsible for the bug. So you can revert it back and you can figure out, look, why did that change actually break my app? Coming back now to our problem of making this group show. Now, the way to actually do this on a button that's doing two things at once is actually to create another event just like this one, which is essentially just going to have the inverse condition, okay? And even though there's two events, all right, when the button is clicked, what Bubble will do is it will look at one event, okay, and look at the condition and then run that workflow if the condition is true. And then it will look at the other event and do exactly the same thing. So it'll cycle through them. So let's create another event here, right? An element is clicked, right? That element, of course, is our button hide, right? And now we can add an action to show that group master, right? And the only thing else for us to do is to actually add an only when condition here on the event. So only when, right, that group master is invisible, right? It isn't visible, so it's the inverse condition, then we're going to show this group, right? And I might just have this be a show /hide button, just to make this a little bit more intuitive. All right, so now we've got this one button. I click it, it's hidden. I click it again, and voila, our group is shown again. What we can also do just to like really dig down and check that this is working properly is actually use this debugger. So if I click step by step, what that's going to do is each time that an event is triggered, okay, it's going to cycle through each action, right? Each of these actions, and pause on each action and actually give you a whole bunch of information, a whole bunch of data about what's going on. So I'll show you that, make that a little bit concrete. If I click that, it's bringing up that first event, okay? So when the group master isn't visible, so this guy here, okay? And the debugger is very helpfully giving us actually that expression, that only when expression, which we can actually click on, get some more information about it. If I click over here on isn't visible, you can actually see that that's evaluating to no. And that's why this only when condition as a whole is evaluating to false. And you can tell that because it's highlighted in red. Okay, so this event isn't going to trigger. So if I click run next, we're actually going to cycle over to the other event, okay, which is when that group is visible, okay? So now it's highlighted in green, so I can click run next, and that'll then cycle over to that first action, which is to hide group master, which I can then run next to execute. All right, cool. Now, the next logical step I think here is to actually have this button say hide when the group is visible, when if I click it, then it's going to hide the group, and have it say show when the inverse is true, okay? So actually have this button conditionally behave depending on the state of the application. That's what we're going to cover in the next video.